Today, we are at a crossroads in our cultural relationship with mental health. All of us have a unique opportunity to engage with others with authenticity and in a way that reduces mental health stigma and supports well-being. We've come a really long way as a culture in terms of normalizing help seeking for mental health concerns. But worry about the perception of others continues to be one of the most important reasons why individuals who need help don't get it. What we know is that stigma is one of the most frequently reported barriers to treatment initiation for all kinds of mental health and substance use concerns. No matter who we ask or how we ask them, it comes up over and over again that therapy is good for other people, for troubled people, for damaged people, but not for me personally. And it becomes a barrier to treatment seeking for all kinds of mental health concerns. Internalized stigma, that is believing, at least on some level, that the stories that we tell ourselves about a marginalized group are true, impacts how we think about ourselves and how we think about our mental health. Mental health stigma, or the perception that people who struggle with mental health concerns or who seek mental health help are crazy, bad, or dangerous, is really problematic. The stigma is pervasive in our culture, and it shows up in how we talk about mental health. Phrases like, he's crazy, or that's crazy. It shows up in how the media talks about mental illness. When there's a dangerous gunman out on the loose, our immediate thought is that he must be crazy. People who are out of control or who make poor decisions are often referred to as crazy. Anyone who's a threat to the public in the media, their mental health comes up. The ways that we interact with one another, both in person and on social media, are influenced both by mental health stigma and in the internalized stigma we hold for ourselves, imagining that we are part of this marginalized group. So when someone begins to think about mental health treatment, to do so, they need to associate themselves with people in a stigmatized category. That I could be not that far away from all those so-called crazy people in the media or on social media. This is one of the biggest barriers to treatment seeking. A huge part of this evolves on social media, how we present ourselves on social media, and how we talk about mental health on social media. In my own research on expectations about psychotherapy, I asked people what they thought about counseling, what they sought from counseling. And over again, they say they want to learn more about what's normal in mental health and worry about whether or not they and their behavior are normal. This is one of the indicators of how pervasive internalized stigma is, that even individuals who have already made the decision to enter into therapy worry that I or their therapist or people around them will think that there's something wrong with them. Part of this is a problem in language. We use the same words to talk about someone who is severely mentally ill and someone who experiences a transient, mild sort of thing. This misspecification in language is really problematic, right? If we said respiratory distress for everything from a little mild exercise-induced asthma to someone who's literally on a ventilator in a hospital, it would create a lot of confusion around the term respiratory distress. That's essentially what we've done with mental illness or mental health. Because of misspecification, we've created a lack of clarity. This doesn't work for us and leads to the minimization and miscategorization of mental health concerns. Because once again, when we have internalized stigma, we are hesitant to associate ourselves with a marginalized group. And so we see everything from that little bit of anxiety or that little bit of depression we experience as a normal part of life is associated with what we see in the media as crazy or disturbed. All of this taken together is internalized stigma. We begin to identify with marginalized groups when we're struggling with our mental health, and that's scary. There's a natural attempt to push that away and to make distinctions between us and the marginalized group, to say we're somehow different or better. Recently, experts have identified stigma-promoting behaviors and language across social media platforms. One insidious and well-meaning way that stigma is promoted through social media is in pressure to be positive or to look on the bright side, something that people have called toxic positivity or the cult of positivity. It perpetuates this idea that we should be mentally tough enough to overcome any difficulty we have so that we can create separation between us and those members of the marginalized and stigmatized group. The dark side of the good vibes only trend is toxic positivity. Toxic positivity is the excessive and ineffective overgeneralization of a happy and optimistic state that results in the minimization and invalidation of the authentic human emotional experience. Now, I'm not pessimistic, quite the opposite actually, but when positivity is used to cover up, minimize, or deny experiences, it's really unhealthy for us, and worse, promotes stigmatizing language and behavior. On popular social media platforms, this emerges in our content, things like no bad vibes and memes related to positivity. It evolves in our responses to others, where there's a failure to acknowledge problems or difficulties and instead encourage people to look on the bright side or buck up. It also evolves in the way that we use gaslighting and minimization in really well-meaning ways, but things like saying first world problems or other ways of minimizing difficulty. The very nature of mental illness and mental health concerns is that you can't think your way out of it. On some level, most people who struggle with their mental health are aware that what they're doing isn't healthy. But the very core of mental illness is that you can't think your way out of it. You can't reason your way out of it. And so as much as we have evolved as a society in terms of how we think about mental health, there's this moral or cognitive failing narrative that's alive and well and perpetuated in the cult of positivity on social media. This cult of positivity is really problematic for us because it leads to dismissing emotions, feeling guilty for having negative emotions, and it minimizes experience, gaslights difficult experiences, and leads to shame and judgment that we internalize as stigma. And what that does is it reinforces a shame and blame cycle that contributes to the idea that if people just tried hard enough, mental illness would be gone. Taken together, all of this contributes to stigma around mental health and help seeking for mental health concerns. We know now that this is particularly damaging to teens and young adults. And so there's been a lot of emphasis on breaking the stigma. To break the stigma surrounding mental health help-seeking behavior, we need to address all the ways in which stigma emerges, including those that are well-meaning. By openly addressing the cult of positivity, we can reduce stigma and promote healthy behaviors related to mental health. All right, so how do you know you're doing it? So you know you're doing it if you find yourself hiding your true feelings and creating a social media self. We've often heard about that idea that what we present on social media is the polished or beautiful version of ourselves. And feeling this sense of having to do that, having to hide true feelings because people would judge or dislike you for being real, you're doing it. You're also doing cult of positivity when you feel shame or guilt for having feelings, or minimizing your own or other people's experience with feel-good quotes. Now, I know it's meant to be inspirational, but sometimes that feels like minimizing, and it's really problematic. Another way in which cult of positivity emerges in well-meaning ways is trying to give other people perspective, like it could be worse, or look on the bright side, or it's a first world problem, instead of validating the authenticity of the experience. The last big tip-off that you're engaged in the cult of positivity is that you're shaming yourself or other people for not being able to shake it off or get over a disturbance. So how can you be a positive support? Because I think that's the pathway. Becoming a positive support on social media and in your interactions with other humans is one way that we can all contribute in a meaningful way to the reduction of mental health stigma. First thing, it starts with yourself. Empathy and authenticity with yourself, really embracing all of the feelings that are part of an authentic human experience. And that includes some difficult feelings sometimes. Taking that authenticity then into the people that you love, being your real self and experiencing a range of human emotions around the people that you care about. Next, extend that into how you offer acceptance and validation for others. So acceptance and validation is finding the kernel of truth in what people say, or finding a way to identify the core emotional experience. We don't have to agree that everyone is having the worst day ever, and we don't have to become pessimistic. But we need to validate the authenticity of an emotional experience. If something is struggling and in it, they're in it, whether you think it's real or not. And it's really critical to validate and accept that emotional experience, regardless of where it came from. Finally, figuring out ways to offer support to help your friends and family to find their own solution. When we accept and validate other people, it helps them to feel empowered. And we can offer the opportunity to stand with people as they go through their struggles, or to support them as they build their own solutions. All of these things come from a place of authenticity and connection. And when we deal with each other with authenticity, with connection, and with support, we can make our important contribution to reducing mental health stigma and creating a society that validates emotional experiences, whatever they are. Thank you.